Hello, rune scholar, wherever and whenever you are. I'm the modern Erilar. In several episodes, I've mentioned that historical rune writers used certain runes to represent the concept by which they are named. So today, let's concentrate on this type of abbreviation, or the use of ideographic runes. You might also sometimes see the German word Begriffsrunen, or sometimes in Swedish you'll see begreppsrunor, but you'll usually see the German loanword or the English phrase used for this concept. An ideogram or ideograph is a symbol used within a given writing system to represent an idea or a concept. For any given Futhark, whether Elder Futhark or Anglo-Saxon Futhorc or one of the Younger Futharks, each rune had its own name, and that name was usually an intelligible word within the language of the time of use, but not always. We know that by the time of the Old Swedish rune poem, for example, the names of the runes Tors and Os were archaisms, anachronistic words with no cognate in the Old Swedish language of around 1600, when versions of the Old Swedish rune poem were recorded. So these names are probably survivals from the older Nordic words that these rune names are based on. Rune names did change over time to suit the languages that used Futharks, as those languages themselves shifted and changed. So how do we identify ideographic runes? Well, Klaus Düwel suggested two criteria: graphic and semantic. The rune graph must appear as a known rune representing a sound in other inscriptions, and this excludes symbols like sun wheels, which, while understood as common pre-Christian symbols, are not known to have stood for a specific sound within the language. Then, in the context of the inscription, the presence of the word that the rune means must make intelligible sense. But this can get a little squishy. This criterion does permit the use of cultic invocations that are more difficult to interpret without their supernatural context, such as the phrase 9 needs, known from several runic curses, where runes are invoked against the demons of disease. These magical interpretations are the area of greatest disagreement between various runologists, and while we modern rune readers may need context to be able to interpret certain ideographic runes, this concept may have made perfect sense to the historical rune carver. So let's have a look at some of these ideographic runes used in historical inscriptions and in manuscripts. I've already mentioned ideographic use of the rune Jera on the Stentoften runestone, represented as a single rune. Stentoften is in Blekinge, and this is now in the southern part of Sweden. And this inscription dates perhaps to the 7th century or so, the late 6th or the 7th. The larger inscription, I'm only showing a phrase of it here. The larger inscription reads, "With 9 steeds with 9 goat bucks, Hathawolf gave Jera," or good year, with the sense that this was a good annual harvest. The rune carver chose to depict this particular rune in a deliberately archaic style, perhaps for emphasis, and you'll see that emphasis is a common but not determining factor for ideographs. We have a second instance of the use of an Elder Futhark rune within an otherwise Younger Futhark inscription. This is from Ingelstad in Norrköping, Östergötland. The text contains one single Elder Futhark Dagos rune, indicating either the name Dag or the word day, according to different possible interpretations of what you can probably see is a pretty damaged second line. The rune writer here has offset the Dagos rune with division marks comprised of a vertical line of 3 points, which only otherwise appear in that inscription as the inception mark for that particular inscription. So it starts the inscription. So the rune carver has chosen to offset this particular rune to show you that it's a little bit special. You'll see that kind of style even in manuscripts. You can see the 2 points around this this particular rune, and this is from the Lindisfarne Gospels, where the glossator, the person who has copied in an Old English translation above the Latin line, the glossator has used the daig, or the day rune, 4 times to stand for its name, where the word day appears in the Gospels of Luke and John. So Sabbato, the Sabbath day, is translated sun day, and again the rune is offset with division marks. The Younger Futhark rune Málder and the Anglo-Saxon rune Món both have names meaning man or humanity, and both were used ideographically. Thomas Birket counted instances of the Málder rune in Hauvemal's Codex Regius, where it was used a total of 45 times, saving a significant amount of space and effort and probably ink as well. Málder and Món also appear regularly in Icelandic manuscripts, in the Novel Codex copy of Beowulf, in the Lindisfarne Gospels, in the Vercelli book, and in the Exeter book. In Old English and Old Germanic tradition, the leek vegetable was a phallic herb associated with lust and fertility, probably due to its resemblance to a phallus and its ability to regenerate from cuttings. Many rune scholars believe that lagus, meaning leek, onion, vigorous growth, or possibly even flax, was the original name for the rune that makes the L sound. So single lagus or lauker runes are usually assumed to be an ideographic representation invoking the concept of fertility when someone applies this kind of an interpretation. Most frequently on early bracteates, if it appears as a single laukas, it appears to have no specific purpose besides a general blessing kind of vibe. From Gjersvik in Norway, a bone meat scraper bears an inscription that's very damaged, clearly a chunk of it's missing, that means that a good portion of it is illegible, but it does definitely bear 10 lagus runes. MacLeod and Mays have interpreted this as a fertility amulet for ensuring an abundance of food. If you're feeling doubtful about this interpretation, I can elaborate on the word laukas in a future episode so that we're not digressing here. Other similar inscriptions are on firmer ground, I promise. Not far from the Stentoften stone, the Gummarp stone bears the inscription that our friend Háthuwulf, he appears again, but with a different spelling to his name. Háthuwulf set 3 staves, and you will also see from the drawing here that there are 3 Fehu runes on this particular stone. On the Flöksandknife, a faint single upside down Fehu rune appears to the left as a later addition to the linen leek of the rest of the inscription. And linen and leek, again, there's an association with fertility. I'll explain it in a future episode. But the Fehu rune and Háthuwulf's on the stone that I just showed you, these could represent the concept of wealth, since wealth was measured in livestock in early Germanic societies, and wealth is one of the interpretations for the name Fehu. And this seems to be confirmed by one of the 4 arm rings of the Galloway hoard. A new translation by Dr. David Parsons' team, released in February 2025, indicates that the ring represented the wealth of the Hegna, or the community, with wealth again represented by the Feo rune, again set off by division marks, and you can probably see the points in the photograph of the arm ring. Hogala, the word for hail, was invoked on the Kragahul spear shaft. That's not what I'm showing you here, but on the Kragahul spear shaft, where it's used in the phrase, I invoke hail in the spear. And since spears can be used as projectiles, having them fall like hail, or at least being charmed to fall like hail, may have added to their effectiveness. This is the Thorsberg shield boss, and it bears a Hogala rune, which might be interpreted as a counter charm, with this being an ideograph for hail, so this shield may have been counter charmed to challenge a hailstorm of spears. An inscription on an 11th century amulet from Sigtuna involves the 9 needs that I mentioned earlier, the 9 needs. They're being invoked against the ogre of wound fever, but that appears on side A of this particular amulet. And the inscription goes on to call that ogre of wound fever a wolf on this side B shown here. And the text then also has 3 ease runes, and then immediately goes on to say, these ease will. So the 3 ease runes are a symbol that creates an action in this particular inscription. The Exeter book has an Anglo-Saxon win rune, standing for its meaning. Again, set off with division marks to stand for the word joy, where it appears in the text. And it appears in a very similar manner in Psalm 99 of the Junius Psalter at Oxford as well. In one of the manuscripts that records the Beowulf epic, the Erthal rune was used at least 13 times to stand for the words homeland and inheritance, both of which are reasonable meanings for the name of the rune Erthal. Again here, you'll see it set off with division marks. In the Ptolemaic or Old English Orosius, the rune Eidl appears once in a single manuscript on the Recto of Folio 53, I think, where it appears in context as the word homeland, and I think that's in book 7 of that particular manuscript. According to MacLeod and Mays, usage of ideographic runes was relatively rare. They admit that as much. Not all of the runes of the Futhark were used ideographically or as abbreviations. We know that as well. And according to Immaculata Senra Silva, Anglo-Saxon scribes who incorporated runes as abbreviations for the words they represented never availed of all possible runic abbreviations within the texts that they were copying. Sometimes a word like joy appears many times in a manuscript before it's abbreviated as the Anglo-Saxon rune win. Until we successfully interpret more runic inscriptions, we can't really know how common this technique may have been among the other inscriptions that we haven't yet deciphered, but we do know that while occurrences of ideographic runes was relatively rare, there are trends that we can identify. In Anglo-Saxon contexts, the runes most frequently applied ideographically were mon and daig. In Scandinavia, the ideographic runes most frequently used were mother and fehu. And usually ideographic runes stand alone, but we do see ideographs occasionally in strings. In the husband's message, which I initially described in episode 6 on the Anglo-Saxon futhorc, the names of the runes, sun road, cornjoy, and man, create kennings that may indicate that the sun road heaven, the cornjoy earth, and the man sending the message affirm the sender's love for the recipient. We know that ideographs may have been used as early as the 3rd century, though we know with near certainty that they were in use by the time the Stentoften and the Gumarp stones were being carved. some rune writers emphasized their ideographic runes. You can use an archaic character, you can flip it upside down, you can set it off with division marks, and this appears both in inscriptions and in manuscripts. We can also tell that ideographic runes sometimes, but not always, performed a magical function. Now, rune magic is a bit of a big topic, so let's talk a little more specifically about runes that appear on amulets in our next episode. Thank you for reading the runes with me, the Modern Erilar.